The Water Magician, episode 4. So, we start off the episode with everybody in class getting together, kind of going over how they're going to do their own dungeon exploration, like their first one going down there. And I love that Rio asks a very important question for everybody, and that's the fact that he knows instant travel is a thing back in his real world, right? At least for like the isekai enjoyers, and he asks if there's instant travel in the labyrinths, and they're like, oh yes, actually, or like in the dungeons, and they're like, oh yes, actually that is very common in some dungeons, but like here in Loontown, our dungeon doesn't have that instant travel option. But it's like they're like, I'm surprised you know that. Like, so what I can gather just from like that first interaction is that yes, there has in fact been somebody from Japan that was isekai here, probably that infernal magician or whatever. But somebody did set up that instant travel kind of like thing, and also just the fact that he knows that means that there's some things that even some adventurers are not privy to, or that they only learn more once they're away from this like school or this courses from the guild. And then we get like a nice little lore dump, or like I guess world building part of for Loontown, and how like it's essentially the dungeon is the center of the town, and everything else got built around it. So like that's why a lot of the walls around the dungeon are like really thick. That's to prevent monsters that escape from said dungeon to like really wreak havoc of the town. And I do like that they they do explore a bit of how the population in the dungeon works, and how like they actually multiply very rapidly, and it could even cause this thing called the Great Tidal Bore, which like is monsters just essentially breaking out of the dungeons and into society. Then we meet more of like the crew that he's with, and one of the ones he happens to like hang around with, Amon, is like a warrior class, or like kind of like a bull, and which uses a sword, and he helps him get his first kill with a fire ant soldier, which apparently they're like deeper grounded creatures, but because they can dig their way through layers, they usually make their way to like higher to like the higher levels, which are for like lower creatures. But really interesting that they Rio does learn from Abel about the magic stones, and he makes Amon aware of that as well. And Amon even questions if they can actually grab that, and they're like, yeah, no, it's fine. This is our spoils for getting our first kill and stuff. So really interesting. And then we have a little more interaction with Abel and Rio, who Abel kind of shows up to make everybody aware that Rio is kind of like a loose cannon. And I just love having Rio and Abel interact once again. Like you could really see how well they play off each other, and how like friendly they've gotten, how close they've really gotten. And it was nice. Like you get to see from everybody else, like of Rio's friends from his guild guild courses, whatnot. They're all like look up to Abel, as he is like the Crimson Knight or something like that. Uh, but it's just so just seeing how different they are, like how everybody treats Abel as if like somebody to put in a pedestal, and here we have Rio, who just kind of like sees Abel as like somebody that's like within his own rank, or like somebody he can just be like buddy and chummy with. It's just a really interesting just a position of the two sides. But then we find out the Abel's real reason for coming to congratulate Rio on his first dungeon uh, exploration, and that's because he was really just trying to avoid filing the paperwork after clearing a quest. So Abel's the type to just avoid all responsibility, I guess. And one of his friends, Lynn, was like heavily staring at Rio, so we can really see that something that Abel was telling him was not adding up, or like they don't believe anything he's saying, and Abel's just like, well, don't you worry about that. once it comes down to it, you'll get to see how strong he truly is. And then we just have Rio deciding to give Amon some more advice as they decide to go back into the dungeon, but this time like go deeper. And they're doing pretty well, like handling the monsters in it, and it was just so nice. Like Rio, obviously having gone through quite a plethora of monsters on his way to this town, he kind of gives them like, "Hey, your style kind of reminds me of Abel," and we get this nice flashback of like Rio waking up and just seeing Abel train, which you can see that there's some admiration to that, where like he likes that Abel is not just relying on his genius or his, he's actually trying to continue to up his skill, continuing to repeat motions that'll keep him sharp, so like he doesn't lose his edge. It's kind of like one of those things where like a prodigy can only, his talents would only take him so far, but a prodigy that sharpens his talents will go to greater heights. Same, or like effort brings in a skill sort of thing, which is really nice to see in this anime. And he basically after that Ryu kind of tells him like, listen, uh your stamina's a bit weak, work on that, like run every day like crazy, and then also train your swings, don't slack off, and you'll get to where Abel is eventually. And then we have afterwards just Ryu decides, I'm not taking a dungeon today, I am just gonna go to the library and check out some books. So he was trying to find some beginners book for alchemy, and I guess they ended up being like too expensive. So he's like, well, I wonder if I have enough. Tries to withdraw funds, and he he does have like a lot of funds from his wyvern days, from his time him and Abel took down all those wyverns. So nice of him. But like as he's trying to chill outside, you just start seeing like everything starts to get dark as the eclipse kind of just like starts passing by, or like starts happening. And then once the eclipse happens, an Akuma shows up, which if you remember in the first episode, one of the things from the diary he was left there was like, if you run into an Akuma, run for it, or like don't engage, or it's it's best to avoid meeting one at all costs. But Rio ended up having to be caught in the middle of this Akuma, whatever it was trying to do in this eclipse, and the fight was stellar. Like I want probably some of the cleanest animations I've seen so far in this series, and probably up there with some of the best this season. And it was just so interesting that as soon as the Akuma realized that magic wasn't working, it started switching to sword attacks, and saw that Rio was also switching to using his blade. And interesting enough, they noticed that Rio was wearing the outfit of the Fairy King. So like the apparently the Fairy King and the Akumas have something in, are like opposing sides. So it's almost begs me to question like if all the things that are happening has been like an ongoing war that people don't really know about, like Akumas versus the fairies, or like the Fairy King was the one that like was able to get rid of the Akumas, and now they're kind of like hiding, biding their time, as we come to find out after the fight ended that there's more than this one. But gotta say, Leonere Uraka Albuquerque, I think that's how you say it. Uh, she was a menace. Like even though Rio was like kind of handling her with magic and mixing in sword techniques, the Akuma are probably some of the strongest things that I've seen. Like if it wasn't because Rio spent a good like 3 months training and making his magic be so be so competent with his magic for those 3 months, and trained every day with the Fairy King, I presume, or like the Dulacan, it would have been so bad for him. Like the Akuma have three, well, at least this one had like was able to use three magic types: wind, fire, and earth. So Rio had to get pretty creative with this water magic, using the water laser jet, using the icicle spheres, and then eventually he used acid rain. I feel like, and that acid rain like shot that happened was incredible. Like some of the best shots from the series, and man, it was just so nice having this kind of like showing of like potential ways that this series, or potential fighting styles that this series can have. Like it can switch off between magic to sword fighting in an instant, and it's just seeming like if there's more than one Akuma, we are in serious trouble. Like people really gotta up their level. They have to get up to Rio's level, and it is so incredible. Like highly recommend just watching this fight, or the highlight of this, the clips of this fight going around, if you haven't already. But yeah, so right now the Akuma can only be seen through the eclipse, which I'm assuming the eclipse is their gateway to being in this world. So, and they're saying that they're gonna meet again. So I'm assuming there's gonna be another eclipse that happens later on in the series. That's gonna be longer, so that the Akuma can pass through. But after this ordeal, like Rio goes back and sees his friends are getting bullied, and he just pretty much takes care of the bullies like instantly, uh, as usual. Rio's just doing crazy things, and then they just kind of like decide, okay, well, Rio's like, I had a long day. Let's just relax, and he puts the like hot water up for them and stuff, and they bathe. And yeah, pretty cool episode. I'm rating this one like a nice 9 out of 10.